The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss and stepped into the massive hall of the Galactic Academy. Her eyes moved slowly across the space, taking in the hundreds of alien cadets who had come from every corner of the known universe. Some had scales that shimmered like jewels. Others floated on invisible energy fields. A few were made entirely of crystal, their bodies catching the light and throwing rainbows across the metal walls. Was none of these things. She was human, small, ordinary. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple knot, and her clothes were clean but clearly old. They had been washed too many times, and the colors had faded to soft shadows of what they once were. But it was her backpack that made everyone stare. While other cadets carried beautiful cases that floated beside them on anti-gravity beams, carried a canvas backpack on her shoulders. The fabric was worn thin in many places. 3 patches covered holes that had torn through over the years. The straps had been fixed with rough stitching, done by hand rather than machine. A tall alien with skin that glowed blue and purple stopped in front of her. His name was L, and he was a species known for their arrogance and their beauty. He looked at its backpack and laughed loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Look at this," he said to his friends. "The humans have sent us a beggar." A large insect-like alien clicked her sharp mouth parts together in amusement. Her name was and she belonged to the hegemony, one of the oldest military powers in the galaxy. "Perhaps all of human technology fits inside that bag," she said. "It would explain why their species is so far behind." More aliens joined in the laughter. They pointed at and whispered to each other in languages she could not understand, but did not react. Her face remained calm, almost peaceful. She had heard words like these before. She had heard them her whole life. A loud voice cut through the noise. "Cadets, form lines." The speaker was Instructor, a member of the ancient race. He was old, his gray skin covered in scars from battles fought long before most of these cadets were born. He had 4 eyes, 2 large ones in the front and 2 smaller ones on the sides of his head. All 4 of them swept across the assembled cadets with cold authority. "You are here because your governments believe you are special," said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "They believe you represent the best your species can offer. Some of you will prove them right. Many of you will prove them wrong." His eyes stopped on, nodding her worn clothes and old backpack. "And some of you, we shall see what you truly are." The cadets were divided into squads and sent to their living quarters. Found herself assigned to Squad 7 along with 5 others. Elda was there, still smirking at her. Otha stood in the corner, her many eyes watching everything. A massive creature named took up most of one side of the room. He was a species built like mountains, with thick arms and skin like armor. A being made of living crystal called Prism hummed quietly near the window, her body singing with strange energies. And then there was. He was human-like, but everything else about him was different. His clothes were expensive, made from fabrics that changed color with his mood. His equipment was the finest money could buy, each piece marked with the logo of his family's company, one of the richest corporations on Earth. He looked at the way one might look at a stain on a white shirt. "You should not have come here," said quietly so only she could hear. "You embarrass our species, you embarrass me." Looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to her assigned locker and carefully placed her backpack inside. She did this slowly, gently, as if the bag contained something precious beyond measure. "What is in there?" Prism asked. Her voice was like wind chimes in a soft breeze. "I can sense something, energy patterns I do not recognize, something old." "Memories," said simply. "That is not what I am sensing." Closed the locker door and turned to face the crystalline being. "Then perhaps you should stop sensing." That night, as the others slept, sat in the darkness by her locker. She pressed one hand against the cold metal door, feeling the shape of the backpack inside through it. Her lips moved in silent words, prayers or promises or something else entirely. El watched her from his bed, his glowing skin dimmed for sleep but his eyes still open. He did not understand this human. She had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. Her body was soft and breakable. Her senses were dull compared to almost every other species in the galaxy. Yet she sat there in the dark with a look on her face that made something uncomfortable twist in his stomach. It was not fear, he told himself. How could anyone fear such a weak creature? But when finally stood and returned to her bed, Elle found that he could not look away from that old locker. He could not stop thinking about what might be inside that worn backpack, and he could not shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake by laughing at her. The lights of distant stars shone through the viewport, cold and ancient. Somewhere in the darkness of space, old wars had been fought and won by creatures that had been underestimated. Elle did not know this yet, but he would learn. They would all learn. The first week at the academy was designed to break them. Instructor believed that soft cadets made dead soldiers, so he pushed them hard, harder than any of them had ever been pushed before. They woke before the artificial sun rose over the station. They trained until their bodies screamed for rest. They slept only when decided they had earned it. Combat simulations came first. The cadets fought against holographic enemies in sealed rooms where the walls could become anything, forests or deserts or the cold vacuum of space. Elle used his speed and his glowing skin to blind his opponents, moved like a shadow, her natural armor deflecting attacks that would have killed softer beings. Simply walked through everything in his path, unstoppable as an avalanche. Did none of these things. She was not fast, she was not strong. She had no natural gifts that made her special, but she watched, she learned, and she survived. Every simulation, every test, every challenge completed, not with the highest scores, not with the lowest. She moved through each trial with quiet efficiency, doing exactly what needed to be done and nothing more. This made her angry. How? Elle demanded one evening after had beaten him in a navigation exercise. His skin flickered between purple and red, colors of frustration and shame. How does your species even survive? You have nothing. You are nothing. Finished putting away her gear before answering. We adapt. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. The mockery grew worse after that. Elle and I made sure of it. Small cruelties, the kind that left no marks but hurt just the same. Someone poured cleaning chemicals on's bed while she was in training. Her food card disappeared from the system for 2 days, leaving her hungry while the others ate. Her name was left off assignment lists, forcing her to work twice as hard to catch up. Through it all, said nothing. She fixed her bed. She found other ways to eat. She caught up on her assignments without complaint. And every night she sat in the darkness by her locker, one hand pressed against the door, lips moving in silent words. Watched this with growing frustration. He was human too, but he had spent his entire life trying to prove that humans could be just as good as any alien species. He had the best equipment. He had trained with the finest teachers money could buy. And yet this poor girl with her worn clothes and old backpack made him look weak by comparison. Why do you not fight back? He asked her one night when the others were asleep. Why do you let them treat you this way? Did not look up from the book she was reading, an old thing with paper pages instead of a digital screen. Fighting back would prove nothing. It would prove you have strength. No, turned a page slowly. It would prove I have pride. Those are not the same thing. Did not understand. He walked away angry and returned to her reading. The second week brought survival training. The cadets were dropped onto a barren moon with minimal supplies and told to reach a checkpoint 50 kilometers away. The ground was sharp with volcanic rock. The air was thin and bitter cold. Half the cadets collapsed before they reached the halfway point. Walked steadily forward. She did not run like Elle, who burned through his energy too quickly and had to stop and rest. She did not try to carry others like, whose kindness slowed him down. She simply walked, one step at a time, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Prism floated beside her for a while, curious about this strange human who seemed so ordinary yet survived everything thrown at her. "You do not seem afraid," the crystal being observed. "Fear is useful," said. "It keeps you alert, but it should not control you." "What controls you then?" Was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "Memory." They reached the checkpoint with minutes to spare. Other squads had failed. Some cadets had to be rescued by emergency shuttles, but Squad 7 survived, dragged across the finish line by the steady pace of their most unremarkable member. That night approached in the barracks. The female's many eyes studied the human with new interest. "You are different from what I expected," she admitted. "When I first saw you, I thought you were weak. Now I am not so sure." "I am weak," said calmly. "By your standards, by almost any standards in this galaxy, humans are weak. We break easily. We die easily. We have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities." "Then how do you survive?" Finally looked up, and there was something old and tired in her eyes, something that had seen too much and carried it all without complaint. "We survive because we refuse to stop, because when everything is taken from us, we find another way. Because the universe has tried to kill us for millions of years and we are still here." She returned to her book and walked away in silence, her many legs clicking softly on the metal floor. The backpack remained in its locker, untouched, unopened, waiting. And somewhere deep inside it, hidden beneath layers of worn fabric and faded patches, something old dreamed of blood and fire, and the terrible things that humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. The announcement came on the morning of the third week. Instructor gathered all the cadets in the main training hall. His 4 eyes moved across them slowly, measuring each one, judging their worth. When he spoke, his rough voice filled every corner of the room. "Today begins your practical examination," he said. "A mock rescue mission in the abandoned sector of this station. Your squads will navigate through dangerous terrain, find a distress signal, and bring back a survivor. You will face simulated enemies. You will face traps. You will face each other." He paused to let the words sink in. "The squad that performs best will receive first choice in assignment postings. The squad that performs worst will spend the next month cleaning waste systems." Groans rose from the cadets. Waste systems on a station with hundreds of different species were legendary in their horror. Things lived in those pipes that had no names in any language. "One more thing," continued. "You may bring any personal equipment you wish. The Academy provides standard gear, but I know some of you have resources from home." His eyes found in his expensive corporate equipment. "Use whatever advantages you have. In real combat, fairness does not exist." Squad 7 gathered in the preparation room to ready themselves, began unpacking his gear with obvious pride, scanning devices that could see through walls, a shield generator that could stop plasma fire, weapons that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. L had brought genetic enhancers from his, drugs that would make his already impressive speed even faster. Carried blades made from her own shed armor, sharper than surgical steel. Needed no equipment. His body was his weapon. Prism simply hummed with stored energy, her crystalline form flickering with power, and walked to her locker. The others watched as she removed the worn backpack, the same one they had mocked since the day she arrived. In the bright lights of the preparation room, they could see it clearly for the first time. The patches were not random, they realized now. They formed a pattern, symbols that none of them recognized. And there, on the main flap, half hidden under years of dirt and wear, was a seal. It was made of dried blood, old and brown and cracked with age, but the pattern was still clear. A circle, a star, letters in an ancient human language. Instructor had been walking through the room, checking on each squad's preparations. His footsteps stopped suddenly. His body went still as stone, and when he saw the seal on his backpack, his hands began to shake. Had never seen the old warrior afraid of anything. None of them had. But's 4 eyes were wide now, and his rough voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Cadet, where did you get that?" Looked up at him without surprise, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "It was my grandmother's." Took a step backward. His hands were shaking so badly now that he pressed them against his sides to hide it. "Your grandmother served in. She was part of." The Silence War said, "Yes." The name struck the room like a physical blow. Every cadet knew of the Silence War, even if the details were hidden behind layers of classified documents and government secrets. It had happened 50 years ago, a conflict that had nearly destroyed 3 civilizations. The war had raged across 100 star systems, killing billions, until suddenly it stopped. No one knew exactly why it stopped, but there were rumors, whispers of a small group of human soldiers who had done something so terrible, so effective, that the enemy had simply surrendered rather than face more of it. The records were sealed. The survivors never spoke of it, but the fear remained, passed down through generations like a ghost story. "The backpack," said slowly, his voice still trembling, "that is from the Quiet Corps." The name meant nothing to the alien cadets, but went pale. Every human child learned about the Quiet Corps in whispered stories when adults thought they were not listening. They were the ones who went where regular soldiers could not go. They did what regular soldiers could not do, and they never, ever came back whole. "My grandmother was Sergeant Han," said, and flinched as if she had struck him. "She carried this backpack through 15 missions behind enemy lines. Every patch is a battle she survived. Every stain is a friend she buried." She held up the backpack so they could all see the blood seal clearly. "She gave this to me when I was 12 years old. She told me that humans do not need fancy equipment to be dangerous. We just need to remember what we are capable of when we have no other choice." His voice was barely audible now. "Sergeant Han, the ghost of 7, we studied her campaigns at the War College. The things she did with nothing but basic equipment were necessary, finished for him, and she never forgot the cost." The room was silent. L's mocking smile had vanished completely. A's many eyes were fixed on the blood seal with something like horror. Even, who feared nothing, had taken a small step away from the worn backpack and the terrible history it carried. Shouldered the bag, adjusting the old straps on her shoulders. The weight settled against her back like an old friend, familiar and comfortable. "Now," she said quietly, "we have an examination to pass." No one laughed at her backpack anymore. The squad gathered around as she opened the backpack for the first time. They expected weapons. They expected hidden technology, secret devices that had won impossible battles and ended a war that threatened to consume the galaxy. Surely, the legendary Quiet Corps had carried something special, something that explained how ordinary humans had defeated enemies that should have crushed them. What they found instead made them stare in confused silence. A water filter made from bamboo and charcoal. A knife so old that the blade had been sharpened down to half its original size. A coil of simple wire. A small medical kit with bandages and basic medicines that looked decades old. And a notebook with paper pages, filled with handwriting in an old human language. "This is it?" L asked. His voice carried no mockery now, only confusion. "This is what made Instructor shake with fear." "No," said. She picked up the notebook and held it carefully, like a holy relic. What made him shake was knowing who used these things and what she accomplished with them. She opened the notebook to a page covered in diagrams and small, careful writing. "My grandmother dropped onto 7 with 42 soldiers. They had 3 days of food. They had no way to escape. Their orders were to destroy a planetary defense grid that was protected by 10,000 enemy troops." A's multiple eyes blinked rapidly. "Impossible. My people's records of that battle say the defense grid failed because of a technical problem, a system error." "Your people's records lie," said flatly. "They lie because the truth was too frightening to admit. 42 humans with basic equipment destroyed a facility that should have required a full battle fleet to attack. They did it in 31 hours. She turned pages slowly, showing them drawings of tunnel systems, notes on patrol schedules, calculations written in margins. My grandmother wrote down everything. How they moved through the swamps using nothing but the stars to guide them. How they turned the enemy's own supplies into weapons. How they exploited every assumption the enemy made about primitive human capabilities. Leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the old pages. What happened to the 42? Was quiet for a moment. Her fingers traced a list of names written on one page, 42 names with small marks beside most of them. 11 made it out. My grandmother carried 3 wounded soldiers on her back for 20 kilometers through enemy territory. She touched the old knife. She took this from an enemy officer who made the mistake of thinking a wounded human woman was helpless. The silence in the room was heavy, like the air before a storm. "This is what you need to understand," said. She looked at each of her in turn, meeting their eyes without fear or pride. "Humans are not dangerous because of what we carry. We are dangerous because of what we are willing to do, what we can endure, what we refuse to surrender, even when logic says we should give up." She held up the bamboo water filter. "This kept my grandmother alive when she had nothing to drink but swamp water that would have killed any of you. She did not need a machine. She needed knowledge and patience." She held up the wire. "This became a trap that stopped an enemy patrol. She did not need a weapon. She needed cleverness and time." She held up the medical kit. "This saved 11 lives when there was no doctor, no hospital, no help coming. She did not need advanced technology. She needed steady hands and the will to keep fighting." Stepped forward. For the first time since they had met, he looked at without contempt or embarrassment. "Why did you not tell us? Why did you let us mock you?" "Because respect that must be demanded is not real respect," said, "and because my grandmother taught me that the greatest advantage is being underestimated." She closed the notebook gently. Every enemy she faced thought humans were weak. They thought our soft bodies and dull senses made us easy prey. They learned differently, but they always learned too late. Prism hummed softly, her crystalline form vibrating with emotion. "What are humans then? If not weak, what are you?" Shouldered the backpack again. The blood seal caught the light, old and dark and terrible. "We are survivors," she said. "Our ancestors lived through ice ages with nothing but stone tools. They crossed oceans in wooden boats held together with rope and hope. They reached the stars with mathematics and metal and sheer stubborn refusal to accept limits." She started walking toward the door that led to the examination area. "Whatever comes next, we will face it the same way we always have." She paused at the door and looked back at her. Aliens who had mocked her, a fellow human who had been ashamed of her, all of them now watching her with something new in their eyes. "My grandmother's notebook has everything we need to pass this examination," said. "Not technology, not weapons, just knowledge that has been paid for in blood and passed down through generations. Are you willing to learn?" One by one, they followed her. Elle, whose pride had been broken and rebuilt into something better, whose military training now seemed incomplete, who had always relied on his strength and now understood that there were other kinds of power. Prism, who sensed the weight of history in that old backpack, and who finally understood what it truly meant to be human. The examination awaited them, but for the first time, Squad 7 moved as one. The abandoned sector of the station was a maze of broken corridors and dead machinery. Emergency lights flickered in red and orange, casting strange shadows on walls that had not seen maintenance in decades. The air was cold and tasted of rust and forgotten things. Squad 7 moved through the darkness like ghosts, led them using techniques from her grandmother's notebook. She showed Elle how to use his glowing skin as a weapon instead of a weakness, flickering it in patterns that confused the enemy sensors. She taught it to read the small signs that revealed hidden traps, dust patterns and air currents, and the tiny vibrations that machines made when they waited to strike. Learned to move quietly despite his massive size, placing his feet exactly where showed him. Prism learned to dim her energy signature, making herself nearly invisible to the scanners that hunted them, and learned the hardest lesson of all. He learned to put aside his expensive equipment and trust in something older and simpler. The distress signal led them deep into the heart of the abandoned sector. Other squads had already failed. They could hear the sounds of simulated combat in the distance, the buzz of training weapons, and the curses of cadets who had triggered traps or walked into ambushes. "Two enemy patrols ahead," Prism whispered. Her crystalline body could sense energy patterns through walls. "They are guarding the corridor to the beacon." In the old days, would have suggested using his shield generator to push through. L would have wanted to use his speed to outrun them, would have offered to simply smash through the obstacles. Instead, they all looked at. She studied the corridor for a long moment, then pulled the wire from her grandmother's backpack. Within minutes, she had created a simple trap using nothing but the wire and debris from the floor. When the first patrol passed through, the trap triggered a chain reaction that brought a section of ceiling down on them. Simulated enemies vanished in bursts of light as the training system registered their defeats. The second patrol came running to investigate. They found Squad 7 waiting for them, positioned exactly where had placed them. L's blinding light, A's swift blades, unstoppable charge, Prism's energy bursts, and fighting alongside his team instead of trying to prove himself alone. The battle lasted less than a minute. They reached the beacon and found the simulated survivor, a holographic projection of a wounded pilot. While the others secured the area, used her grandmother's medical kit to stabilize the projection, completing the mission requirements with care and precision. The journey back was faster. Word had spread through the abandoned sector that Squad 7 was different. Other simulated enemies avoided them. Other squads watched them pass with confusion and respect. When they emerged from the examination area, Instructor was waiting. The old warrior looked at them for a long moment. His four eyes moved from face to face, seeing the changes that the examination had created. These were not the same cadets who had entered the abandoned sector. They had become something more. Then his eyes found the worn backpack on shoulders, and he did something that made everyone watching catch their breath. He raised his hand to his chest and bowed his head. This gesture was reserved for warriors of the highest honor. It was given only to those who had proven themselves in ways that went beyond victory and defeat. In his long life, had made this gesture only a handful of times. "Sergeant Han would be proud," he said quietly. Allowed herself a small smile. "She would tell me I could have done it faster." The examination results were posted the next day. Squad 7 had achieved the highest score in Academy history, not because they had the best equipment or the strongest members. They succeeded because they had learned something that technology could not provide. They had learned what humans truly were. In the weeks that followed, the story spread. Other cadets began to look at their human classmates with new eyes, not with amusement or pity, but with a wariness that bordered on respect. They started asking questions about human history, about the Silent War, about the terrible things that ordinary people could do when pushed too far. The answers they found disturbed them. Humans had survived ice ages that would have frozen entire civilizations. They had crossed their planet's oceans in boats made of wood and cloth, navigating by stars and stubbornness. They had split atoms and walked on their moon and reached across the void of space, not because they were the strongest or the fastest but because they refused to accept that anything was impossible. And when enemies threatened them, when their backs were against the wall and all hope seemed lost, they became something else entirely, something that did not negotiate or surrender, something that kept fighting until the fight was won or they were dead. On the last day of the term, sat alone in the observation deck. The station's viewport showed a field of stars stretching into infinity. Her assignment orders had arrived that morning. A frontier posting, far from the comfortable center of galactic civilization, a place where her skills would be tested daily. She opened her grandmother's notebook one final time and read the last entry, written in careful handwriting that had grown shaky with age. They will always underestimate us. Let them. Our ancestors survived impossible things with nothing but their hands and their will. We reached the stars not because we were special, but because we refused to stop. Whatever comes next, we will face it the same way we have always faced everything, by being exactly what we are, human, and that will always be enough. Closed the notebook and placed it back in the worn backpack. She stood, shouldered the bag, and walked toward the shuttle that would carry her to her future. The blood seal caught the light of a distant star as she moved. Behind her, somewhere in the endless dark between worlds, the galaxy had learned an old lesson once again. Never underestimate a human, especially one carrying a worn backpack and the weight of memory.